to the Pediatric Speech Sisters show. I'm so excited to have my friend here, Kevin Simmons, back on the Pediatric Speech Sisters show. Kevin actually did come online before. He was one of my first video guests. So I'm so thankful, Kevin, that you came back to talk
Of
about
course.
today's topic. Kevin is one of the unicorns in our field, which honestly we hope changes within the next like 25 years at least of being a Black male SLP. And so I had him on here today to talk about celebrating cultural differences in beauty standards. We're doing a Black hair series on the Pediatric Speech Sister show, and I'm thankful because you just so happen to also be a barber. So we're going to be talking a bit about that on today's show. So Kevin, I'm going to go ahead and give your introduction, and then let me know if I miss anything. Kevin is a recent graduate of Radford University in Virginia. He recently received his C. So we have our certified SLP.
Thank
Yes.
you, thank you. Yes.
Yes. Yes. He's been excited to learn more from those around him with inter and intra collaboration in Atlanta, Georgia. He has a background in pediatric and adult populations with diagnostic and treating disorders that include swallowing, dysphonia, ASD, receptive expressive language disorders, pragmatic and childhood apraxia, just to name a few. Special interests include articulation and phonological disorders, oral motor function with pursuits of further training in DTTC and prompt. He currently works in a pediatric setting with aspirations of opening his own clinic that treats both children and adults. I brought him on the show to talk about the unique challenges, triumphs, and perspectives of being a Black male in speech pathology and also the beauty standards. Now, Kev, did I miss anything in the introduction? Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, you hit everything, and I'm excited to touch on the sensory haircuts. I don't want to reveal now, but we'll get to that. So I'm excited.
So first, I want to ask, what is DTTC? Or can you actually tell us what DTTC is and prompt for those who aren't aware?
Yeah, I don't know the prompt acronym, but DTTC is dynamic tactile temporal cueing. So that's a way to give a cue on your face to show the child how to produce that sound. So if that may be like the B sound, and there's not like any lip closure, you can just show them with your cueing, tactile cueing, to put their lips with their finger. And most times they imitate, so it's good for them to like imitate those motor movements, and they're putting their lips, fingers. So I've always been intrigued by that. And then prompt. Again, I would have to look at it. It's like some long name, but it's similar to DTTC, but that's more hands-on. So like you're actually putting your hand to the child's like chin, holding for that jaw stability, so on and so forth.
Well,
So
thank you, because I'm
yeah,
thinking my mentor said that she just got prompt trained or prompt certified, and she was really excited about it. And so
yeah,
like, okay, well, I guess let me add that to my clinical bucket list.
yeah. I
Well,
know.
so, Kev, let me ask you, what is your why? I know that you came on in January, but maybe that changed. Could you give us a refresher?
Yeah, so my why started back before I actually even knew about speech therapy. Always wanted to help individuals, so I got my undergrad in exercise science and psychology. Didn't know how I was going to apply that. I could go to PT school, and different routes of like med school, but I know I wanted to just communicate and hear people's stories. So long story short, I heard, many stories from my small group I was in about these girls in speech therapy. And I was like, what in the world is speech therapy? And I heard it like 3 times. So I was like, all right, God, if this is something you want me to go down, let me research more about it. And lo and behold, I was able to apply to a school that had a leveling track, which you can apply with that without having any background in speech. And it was able to blend in my experience of anatomy and my love for anatomy, and also just like hearing people's stories. Like I remember sitting down with my grandma and grandfather and just like I mean, I was one to just listen to their stories rather than like go outside and play just because they have so much wisdom. And I think you talk about, you know, my why and how it has changed a little bit. But just like looking back from the first time I was talking with you and now, yeah, I just love hearing people's stories and I want to be able to put that on a pedestal and like give their stories out to the world for the voices that have not been heard. And I know you have a question later on about my brand, so I'm excited to get to that and how that has blended into my why and just helping someone out, whether that be through speech therapy or just like honestly being a lending ear. That's why I want to do all these things in my brand. So,
Well, yes. So that does actually bring me to my next question. If you can tell us a little bit about the singing SLP, and it's just been great seeing the evolution from when I followed you, which I think was in January, maybe December, to now
yeah.
it's August, and what you've been doing with your videos. I know, I mean, for you, it probably takes like nothing, but I'm sure that there's a lot of time and effort and creative energy that goes into it. So can you tell us a little bit about the singing SLP and why you got that started?
Yeah. So, close to graduation, I had a couple of my classmates and professors. They were like, "Hey, you should actually make a page and like start doing singing content." And I know people are like, "Oh, you have an okay voice," but no, Melanie, I have a great voice. I wanted to uh, use myself to like show people that you don't have to have a great voice to just like not only educate and like provide whatever material for your clients, your child that you're trying to help with development, but just enjoyment. Like I haven't met anyone that doesn't like music, you know? So it's um I anyway had started that page just from friends and family saying like, hey, you should just create a page and didn't know what that would look like. If you go back to the very first post, it was almost just like language tips
Right.
was me like singing a song and doing like different news around speech therapy and I really didn't have a niche or like set point for all these social medias and I grew into learn that like even when I tried to tailor like all right, I'm gonna do singing videos, I'm just gonna provide an educational content with that almost like what is it? Oh, Weird Al. Almost like Weird Al, just like create funny things like that. But I was like, well, I also want to hear people's stories. I wanted it doesn't have to be a podcast, but just like interview people about speech therapy. I want to do haircuts. I want to do all this. So like I've grown to realize almost with my why it's changed like I don't want to fit into like what social media says like oh you have to be on this line in order to have this great big brand so I'm just trying out some new things where it's like one day if I want to post about these haircuts and it's not even close to articulation or what have you, then I'm just gonna still post it. And if the numbers aren't there, that's fine. Like I just want to keep growing and providing this experience. I want it to be a page where it's like you don't have to have of learning everything at that one moment. I've had a lot of people, even on TikTok, like, oh man, I'm scared after seeing this video. Like, do I have enough to make it to grad school? And it's like that's the beauty and the journey of social media too. It's like, yes, you do. Like, I mean, it's grad school is hard, but like I want to be able to provide those resources for grad school students. So haircuts for parents, like So that's why I've been so like passionate and enjoying this journey on this social media. Whether even my numbers dip down, what have you, realize that if I can impact one person, one family, I'm content with that.
Well, I love how you keep mentioning numbers because honestly, I think personally what you're doing is fabulous. And I
Thank
think
you.
that what you're doing will live on. You also have a YouTube channel. I'm gonna put that out there.
Thank
Kevin
you.
has
Thank
a
you.
YouTube channel. So that is going to live on. And I definitely see in the future. I mean, you've already made such a big impact. But I think about the generations that are coming up after us, who's going to see your content, and just so everyone knows listening to this, if you're an SLP to B or CF, SLPA, we are going to be doing a little collaboration for the Praxis exam. So just stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
That's in the works. Let's get into black hair. So I'm thinking about how you're a barber and you do
Mhm.
your sensory haircuts. And when I think about the barber shop, I think about my brother who my dad would always take him to get his hair cut on
Yeah.
Saturday mornings, like every other Saturday morning, and how that's a culture in it of itself. So, can you tell us a bit how, before we even get into that nitty gritty, can you tell us a bit about how sensory cuts got started?
Yeah. So, kind of tying in what we're gonna do, I had grown up, going to the barber. Sometimes my dad would cut my hair, sometimes my mom. And it was sometimes um just the one guard, across, and like it was a cool style, I guess, but I always wanted to learn how to do the fade, or like educate barbers that I lived in a predominantly white, Asian population, and a lot of the barbers, they were not black. So trying to educate them, like, hey, this is how you do a fade. And some of them would say, like, oh, yeah, I know how to do that. But Melanie, I would walk out and it was just like a line. And I'm like, oh, man. So I think it was after experience, after it was just like a one line across. You know what? Let me just try out myself. I mean, worst that could happen, I could just so long story short, was able to watch YouTube videos, how to cut my own, and the sensory haircuts came into play because one day, mom, I think she was just talking out loud, but she was like, "Man, I wish I could find someone to do like sensory haircuts or just haircuts for my child who is overstimulated." A lot of the places, which I've heard a lot from families, is that um, they have a quota. Barbers have a quota, which I understand. So
Mm.
they can't, necessarily have, an hour and a half long or hour long haircut. I mean, they got to keep it moving. So I understand that. But parents weren't able to find, that extended patience with the barber. So her overheard her, and I was like, well, I cut hair myself, like on myself. So just try. And I'm like more than positive. There's been a lot of haircuts, some that I'll be honest that haven't gone as planned. But I know that it's a growing start from the next haircut, which may be less tears, But anyway, that first one, the first family, it was beautiful. Like I mean, took time, took breaks in between, sang songs, all this stuff, all the things that I enjoy, and the child enjoyed. And the family, they were shocked because it had been a 3-hour long process to just get, prepared for the haircut, to have the sister hold down the brother, to have the mom, cut the hair. So it had transformed into just that one single experience where we're able to sing songs, we're able to show them that like this is a tool that's just gonna show tickles and make it fun and enjoyment. And then at the end, he's ready for the next haircut and he's enjoying like looking at his hair. So um after that, I knew that, like, yes, I can impact, the community around me, but I know that there are many families that are struggling right now, and I know that there's a sensory barber. I think it was in Philly. His TikTok video like went viral where he has his own barbershop. So like that is the inspiration to go alongside him and like educate families that are having, I'm talking traumatic experiences. So hopefully one day I can travel and give haircuts, but like that's how it started off, and hopefully I can continue to help out these families in need.
Yeah, I mean, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about how healing, honestly, I'm just thinking from a parent's perspective, how finally there's someone who at least understands that their child has autism.
Yeah.
Because like you said, the average person who doesn't have anyone in their family with a disability or who's not,
Right.
a speech pathologist,
Right.
wouldn't understand that, my child has autism. So even
Mm.
the sound of clippers could trigger him.
Right.
So I actually wanna know, what are the parents' reactions?
So honestly, if not 90% or higher, um, and I only say the 10% just because, uh, like I say, there are some cuts where, yeah, I mean, there are tears. We just have to get through it. But it's not like a hold down and like
Right.
just traumatic experience. But there are times where it's like, all right, this 10 seconds between cuts, like we're just gonna have to do like seconds because the child is eloping or what have you. So we're just gonna have to get through it. And then at the end, they enjoy it. Uh, so the 90%, they are like just amazed, and I'm not one to like brag or just say like, oh, this is all my doing, because it's not. It's the parents like, and them able to help me out. But um I will say it is a little shocking just because, and sad, I will say, just because like some of the haircuts I give, they're sitting down. I may use scissors and cutting, we're taking breaks or whatever. And like constantly parents are like, wow, this is like the best experience we've ever had. And it's it like I said, it's a little sad because it's like, "Oh my gosh, this child is 8 years old, and, maybe their hair is down to their shoulders, or maybe their, hair is pretty short, but, like, it's, kinda tangled all over, but they haven't had an experience where, like, that child is able to feel independent, feel, like, safe." And again, that's not to call out the barbers, because they have to meet that quota, but, it's a unique experience where I'm able to hear, um, these pleas for, like, continued haircuts and, continued experiences, such as that, because I mean, it is beautiful, but it's just like, wow, it's been that long, and, they've been suffering for that long, so it's been cool to hear that. Um, I've been given, a valuable experience for them.
That's awesome, 'cause I mean,
Yeah.
I think about even just putting myself in the barber shoes who don't have, like, your experience with children with disabilities, and it's also just lack of education, and I'm thinking about, like, the stigma of
Right,
disabilities, and so they're probably in the mode of the stigma of it all, and they're just like, "I do not have time for this." So,
right.
yeah, I shout out to you,
Yeah,
Kev, honestly, I
thank
can't
you.
wait to see this business blow up.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
So I do want to talk a bit about black hair, and I'm thinking about one thing how you would when you would go and get your hair cut by people who aren't familiar with cutting black hair, and you kept saying the line, and I'm thinking about the listeners who might be listening on podcasts who have no idea what you mean by the line. Can you
Oh, yeah.
so I think about people like in middle school or even high school, and honestly, even maybe LeBron James, who had the line issue.
Right, right.
Break that down
Yeah.
and the
Um,
social implications of it for us.
yeah. So,
Yeah,
um, the line is the hairline. So, um I've been growing out my hair actually, just so it can like hang down, cover my hairline. And I mean, my dad is bald, looks great. And we'll get more into like how different men and women's beauty standards in the Black community is like so valuable. But anyway, yeah, my dad is bald, and um, I know my hairline is on the right side, going back a little bit. So I've always been like self conscious of that, and like um, letting it, if I get a haircut, like just letting that side keep growing in, and then like you can cut the left side. So just like explaining that to a barber, um, and especially individuals that don't look like us, it's like so hard because it's like, all right, do not like just don't even touch the hairline. And then when they do, and it's like, all right, well, that's but anyway, to the viewers, the hairline is so important in the Black community just because it's like, it if you cut it too far, um, it can look like someone's hairline is receding. If if you're not straight and accurate with it, it can look lopsided. It can look, I mean, it can look funny, so,
Yeah.
it's very, I mean, when you go to a barber and the Black barber experience, that's probably the very first thing. I mean, and you could have, your hair loss or whatever, and still people with Black men who are having hair loss, they still like they get it cut down. They want to have a sharp hairline. Um, and I think that's, I guess, so important for, I'll speak for myself and my experience. So important because it's just like the image that we put out. We've always had a target on our eyes, like, oh, is this, school just bringing him in for affirmative action? Is this, doctor, hiring this Black person because of just the color of their skin, trying to fill a quota or whatever. So it's always been important because we've had the education, we have the smarts, we have the beauty, but it's now the image, and we have to be on top of our game every second of the day. Like, you
Mhm.
can't sleep, you know what I mean? On social media, there may be someone that's looking at us. We have to be on top of our game. So yeah, again, the hairline is so important because when you have an interview, when you have a resume, and it's like, all right, let's look at Melanie, and then the first thing someone looks at is your face. I would hope, Um, so that's, I mean, that's where the Black men and woman experience comes from, the hairline. And we can get deeper into like um different hairstyles, but I know the hairline is so important. And why, like, yeah, that honestly why I just switched up and was like, let me just get my own hair. Cause if I make a mistake, I can only blame myself, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, 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 instead of being mad at yeah, I
right.
get it, and I
Yeah.
definitely hear you with the burden of going into professional environments, and it's just like, I know you know the phrase, but there's this phrase that we even say in the Black community where we have to work twice as good or we have to be
Yep.
twice as good, and
Yep.
so it's like I like how you mentioned the medical profession or doctors, and I mean, in general, it doesn't matter if you're white, Black, whatever, we have perfectionism in our society, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
that
Yeah.
layer, and then there's the layer of being Black, walking in, and our hair has to be on point because if it's
Yeah.
not on point, I just think about the first thing that came to my mind was baby kids, which is awful. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
baby kids, I'm not about to start throwing out racial slurs right now, but those are
Yeah.
things that I think that where it gets really deep rooted. Uh,
Mhm.
so let's talk a little bit about the Black barber experience. I kind of want to move from the heaviness for a second,
Yeah, yeah.
just about what it's like in a Black barber shop and what that experience is like from your perspective.
Yeah, so, honestly, why I enjoy, doing sensory haircuts, but, like, when you think of, or at least when I think of Black barbershops, I remember just going in and seeing, like, my people and just, like, all the chatter about sports, and, it's almost like, you know, people making fun of you, but, like, that's just our way to show that we love you, you know what I mean? So the more we make fun of you, the more we love you. So, um, yeah, the black barber experience is so, like, unique in a way that, like, it's I know growing up, sometimes, my dad and I, we would just go just to get a lineup, but still like for the conversation, like, hey, what's going on in the community? What's going on, in the sports world? And it's just a way for conversation and um, like how I've been able to do that, with my haircuts, like with music, integration, and just like talking with the children. It's unique because it's not just like quiet and like, all right, clip, 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 clip. So it's cool. I mean, if I didn't learn how to cut my own hair, I would tell all my friends, white or black, to go to a barber, a black barber, just because it's like it's just a different feeling. Like it's so cool to have older men and younger men, teach each other about the world. And I think that's where the heavy conversations can come into play, and how, um, honestly, man, black barbers and that experience could be political leaders just with how, like,
Mm.
some of the resolutions we've come up with. And, but it's cool because it's just like when you think about the black community, when you think about like where are you getting your haircut from, um, you think about an older and who's been in the community for 20 plus years offering $15 haircuts. I think that's just so cool.
Yeah, I think about how you said how some of the heavy topics could come into mind. Is there anything that comes off the top of your head of certain topics that could be discussed in barbershops?
Yeah, so I know, like, so I did start learning how to cut my own hair, but I would go back, every now and then if I was going to like a wedding, and I had to look crisp. You know how it is, have to look crisp. So I think at the time it was when Barack and Trump had been going and having their election. So it was like right around that time. Um, and I think the conversations around that, it wasn't necessarily like just hate spewing out like, "Oh, man, well, this president, he needs to, like, just, like, lead the race," and all this stuff. But, obviously, being Black, like, the majority of the Black population wanted Barack Obama to win. But it was on the other side. It was almost just, like, showing love. And yes, there was shouting, but there's showing love of, another person, and, all that they've gone through. Um, and just hearing these conversations about, like, the impact what a Black president could do, um, not just for the country, but just for, like, the individual talking, in the barbershop, like, how impactful that would be, to let their grandchild know that, like, hey, this is monumental because we've never seen a black person in the White House. This is monumental because we have a voice that can speak about the black experience. This is monumental, so on and so forth. So it was cool to see. It was more one-sided on the fact that, like, how impactful, his presidency was, rather than, um there's a lot of things you can say about an opponent. So it was more so on the other side of just like showing love, and like how, I mean, man, I miss Brock, but
I know, I'm sitting here heartbroken.
right.
But yeah, I mean, when you're talking, I'm thinking about how, I mean, of course, just from my perspective as a Black woman, seeing, I mean, Michelle Obama in the White House, I'm like, yes, queen.
Yes,
I
yes.
mean, seeing Barack Obama was also amazing. But I didn't even really think about what that meant for Black men to have another Black man as the president of the United States.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm sure in the barbershop, I mean, I'm sure that was just a big celebration when he was in the White House. But yeah, that was real sad when he
Yeah.
had.
Yeah, it was, sorry, real quick. It was just like one of those things where, Um, I know the president role is like probably it is the hardest job to, side on one side of a conflict where, 50% of the US is on the other side. So I know how hard that is, but just to see like someone that looks like us, and we always talk about in the Black community that sense of relief, like finding a Black doctor is it's literally like a
Thing.
all right. So now I can focus on, the other medical reasons, but like that's another medical reason in itself. Like just the high blood pressure, just trying to find, a doctor that looks like you and can understand some of the things you go through. So yeah, just to see him in office, it was just like, okay, I know
Yeah.
life is hard, but I know he's about to get some things done, and which he did, Michelle did, and
Yeah.
um, not a tangent, but real quick, like even just thinking about intersectionality, like with politics and our field right now, like I remember talking to my sister about like how does it feel to be, a black PT, how to be a black woman doctor, and she said it's hard because it's like you can't raise your voice because then it's like, oh, that's the angry black woman. You know what I mean? So I mean, it Jordan brought up a video about like why everything is about being black. Like it's
Yeah.
like we everything is. And there's been comments where it's like, oh my gosh, another video like this, blah blah blah.
Wow.
But it's yeah, I just bring up this point just because it's like every conversation we have, everything in speech and life, yeah, it's just about it we have to bring this up because every topic of conversation is about our suffering. So,
Yeah.
if we don't educate, which it seems like we have to,
Mm.
which is a sad thing because we would think that we would have many, many allies to support us, but it's like, all right, we got to take it into our own hands. So yeah, that was a little tangent, but
No,
just
no, and I appreciate that tangent. I mean, there when you talk about suffering, yeah, because there's just a lot that's coming up for me. But even in the conversation of not appearing like the angry black woman or
yeah,
angry black man in our work environments, when really we're just being passionate or speaking up
exactly.
against something that we might think is wrong. I'm thinking about a particular moment in my old work environment where I actually held my tongue and decided not to say anything because I'm like, you know what? I know that if I walk in, the energy is going to be very strong and everyone's
Yeah.
going to be afraid of me.
Was
So,
this your post on Instagram like maybe 2 or 3 days ago?
yeah, well, it
Yeah.
wasn't about that. There are so many things that happen in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
environment,
Oh,
like,
yeah,
honestly,
yeah.
but that was the situation I'm talking about happened before that.
Uh,
So you can just imagine the
of
slew of
course, yeah,
that led
yeah.
to my departure. So I want to talk about black hair and black male hair and speech pathology. Have you had any experiences, microaggressions, celebrations, or anything like that about your hair in our field?
Yeah, so,
And
as I was
even
looking
and I'm sorry to interrupt, even when you were in the PT world too.
oh, yeah,
Mhm.
so okay, that's actually a good point. So I have yeah, 2 stories. Okay, 2 stories. So, the first one was when I was a PT aide, and, as an aide, you go around and clients with sizes, get them water, whatever. And we had a individual, and this is pretty close to when I was applying to speech schools and all that. So I'll leave, but anyway, we had myself and another black woman PT aide, and we were in a population where it's I mean, 90% is, older, like, close to retirement, um, white individuals from this, like, old city. So they grew up in a different time, which I understand. But anyway, I was getting this gentleman water and just conversing with him, and he looked at me, and I can't remember the exact details, but I do remember like some of the points he made. He looked at me and he was like, "Wow, I've never seen one dressed like you." And I, as a aide and just in our business, like we had to not dress. It wasn't like business casual, but still it was like nice jeans, or nice pants and a shirt. But anyway, I like to me go above and beyond. So I would always wear like a collared shirt, or like a button up and then pants. Anyway, he like mean, and he was like, "Well, I've never seen, a Negro," and that stuck out to me just because. So this gentleman is like 85 maybe at the, and I know I and as I was processing in that moment, I know that like that's just the language he grew up in, and like I said, it's predominantly white. It's predominantly just an old. So to see, two black people, for that fact, in that county, not rare, but it's just like, oh. So as I was processing that, I was like, okay. But then he starts to just go on and he's like, yeah, I've just never seen, a Negro like have, clean cut hair and dress how you dressing. And I remember after I got his water from him, I was like, yo, I won't name my coworker, but I was just like, yo, can you go take over? Because she is strong with it, and she had my back. But uh, we were just both like shocked, but also just like understanding of the time. And this was only this was 3 years ago, so yeah, before I graduated. So yeah, 3 years ago, and we're having that language, and we can't even really educate. But luckily my my business, they were like, we don't accept that language. And so he had to go to another PT place. But it was like it was really sad, honestly, just because it's like, okay, well, I understand that, he grew up in a different time, and, having these conversations, with, my white friend.
Okay, everyone who is online, just hold off 1 second. I'm gonna refresh the screen. I think that Kevin's Wi-Fi might have went out a little bit. It's been stormy along the coast. One moment. Well, while we wait for Kevin to get online, I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. I mean, he just brought up, um, honestly, a very traumatizing or potentially triggering topic, and experience that he had. And so I'd like to know what your thoughts are. Go ahead and drop it in the comments. Hey, Kev, you went
Okay,
out a little bit.
I
So
did. Okay.
yes, I don't know. I might have missed, but the last thing I remember you saying is how your PT company had that guy go to another facility, right?
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. I reloaded just to see if that it looks good now. Okay.
Yes, yes,
All right.
and then I did a little reload moment too, so we're good.
Okay. So yes, he left, and then so I was saying that yeah, it was a little sad just because at first when I was explaining to my white allies and my white friends, like the constant theme of like, yeah, well, he's older and he lives in a different time, or he lived in a different time, and that language, was heard. And I was like, okay, well, I get that. But then I was like, just like looking within myself too, I was like, that language is still inappropriate. Like, why? And he wasn't getting a pass, but it was still just like, oh, older gentleman, like he'll learn, or like if he hasn't learned, it's just because he lived in that older time. But it's like, why are we going soft on the fact that this man just said that he's never seen a black man, a
Yeah,
negro,
being a black.
but dress nice, or like so that was, I mean, disappointing for sure. And again, one of the reasons why I like was passionate and started a DEI campaign and in grad school. But um that was one of the first, I guess, microaggressions towards me and my colleague that I experienced before grad school. But during grad school, I'm not gonna name names. I'm just gonna make it broad.
Okay.
But during grad school, I decided, this is during like right before COVID, and then after COVID when we were online, I decided to grow my hair out. I was like, you know what? I haven't done it in so long, and every time I try to maintain it, it just doesn't work out well. But I was like, I mean, we're in class, like I can just wear a hat. Um, so I started to grow it out, and I asked someone, again, I'm gonna try to make it super broad. I asked someone, I'm like, hey, do you know any place in Radford that does like braids or cornrows? I'm trying to get my hair cornrowed. And to give you a picture of Radford, Virginia, it is southwest, yeah, Virginia. And if you think the last story I just described is like mostly white, Radford, Virginia is like, I think it's like 70% white. I mean, it's like the student population, yeah, it's um I think brown and black individuals may be made up 5%. I have to look at the numbers. I don't want to just give off random numbers, but it was low for sure. Um, so with those low numbers, there's not going to be a lot of black barbers or stylists. The maybe closest city you could find, a black experience is I forget the city, but it was maybe 45 an hour away. So anyway, I was like, there's got maybe my chances are there's someone diverse in their styling that can do my hair. And so I asked this question, and I can't make this up. She was like, no, we're not from the ghetto. And I was like, huh?
Oh,
So I will say this so it the audience can
mm,
understand, this happened in class. So, that's all I'll say, but I was like, "What?" So that was, again, like, shocking to me that someone can use this language and feel confident enough to use this language and be like, "Yeah, like, even if it's a joke, like, he'll understand." Like, what?
mm, mm,
So
mm.
that, 1, that made me mad, and 2, that made me wanna grow out my hair even more. So, but yeah, it's stuff like that, and how you discuss with your work experience, it's just like a cycle. I mean, it shocked me, but then it was just like, "Alright, here, on to the next microaggression, I'm gonna receive." Um, but, I think about the Black experience, and how, like, I mean, we love our hair, we love our baldness, like, we love our identity, and for someone to take that away, I know our ancestors have gone through slavery, have their freedom had been taken away, but,
Mm.
like, now to have that freedom back, and it's almost like culture ripping another thing away from us, and it's like, what can we have? Alright, so, like, you make fun of, the Black experience by insinuating that, getting our hair braided, that's ghetto, but then, there's the same, individual that may, you know how it is, Black appropriation.
Yeah.
There's white individuals are trying to get their hair braided like us. They're trying to get darker skin tones and get tans like us. So yeah, there's a lot of heavy conversations, and I feel like this would be like a part two
It has to
because
be.
you know how it is. Yeah, um, but it was definitely sad
Yeah.
to hear that, like, that mentality though, like, in that joking concept that, like, behind every joke is reality and,
Oh,
like, truth, and, like, she believed that, like, she believed that, the black hair experience, the braids, like, that's a little too ghetto for, I don't know if she meant, speech pathology or just, like, in that area, but she meant that, "Nah, that's too
mhm,
ghetto," you know?
mhm, and
So
it's there I mean, as always, this whole conversation, there's so many things going throughout my head, so
yeah,
definitely the layers and the Black experience when it comes to even just the cultural appropriation, that is a whole separate
right.
topic and even debate.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
people would be like, I mean, it's really appreciation that we're getting braids, and I mean, I thought about Kim Kardashian immediately, so we were on the same page as that, where it's like, well,
Oh, yeah,
Kim Kardashian has braids, so now it's fashionable to get braids or even locks. That's
yeah,
something I'm still trying to accept that non-Black people are getting locks. Like, that's something that honestly I have to dig deep within myself and be like, "Okay, let me find some acceptance," because we have been
yeah,
ridiculed for so long stepping into I mean, even just existing with our hairstyles and how we choose to express
mm,
ourselves, having different colors in our hair, deciding to get braids, deciding to get locks, deciding to grow our hair out into a big afro. I remember reading a
yeah,
comment on that post I made the other day, and the post was pretty much I was asking other Black speech pathologists about microaggressions that they had. And one woman said that it might have even been Black managers who sent her
mm,
home for having no, didn't send her home for having an afro, but said next time you need to come with your hair pulled up in a bun. Like you can't have your hair as an afro. Um,
mm,
yes, and so it runs deep and so I was telling her, I said, "You know what? It's so sad because
yeah,
we get" you know, there are just so many words that are running through my mind. We are going through these professional
yeah,
experiences, going through our own traumas, being told that how we show up is not enough. We need to try harder, work twice as good. And so when we get into those
mhm,
positions of power, it's sad. It's almost like we're not even realizing that we're doing it, but we start perpetuating those same patterns. Um,
yeah,
the other thing I wanted to mention is how you were in your graduate school environment. You didn't even study speech pathology in undergrad. So you were new to the profession. And so, I mean, how I don't want to put words into your mouth. So how was that for you and your did you have any changes of perception of speech pathology, or did you just say that was just the world?
no, that's a great question. I think, I when I did my initial research, I was like, "Okay, why is it just, like, predominantly white female?" Um, I didn't really, like, question or, like, look any deeper until I actually stepped onto campus where I was like, "Wow, this is okay, so we've got 2 other males," and I think in the undergraduate courses, maybe 1 maybe 2 Black females, so I think that's when I started, like, looking into myself more and like, okay, well, I have to put on an image. Even when I was growing out my hair, like I had to make sure that it was tailored because like there are always eyes watching me. There are always um thoughts running through people's minds that, "Oh, that's too ghetto." And I think that's kind of blending in with my why. My why is just getting bigger and bigger, but I think that's why I'm, like, so passionate. First, with growing out my hair and doing different hairstyles, each week, um, but also because I know that there are many, and I'm very happy that there are many, Black CFs, there's many Black SLPAs and SLPs, um, coming through grad school, and they are lucky to see us because I mean, it's a scary experience not having someone that looks like you, in a new world. So not only to go through speech therapy, but like you know how hard it is, but to go through speech therapy, and learn these new concepts without an advocate, without a friend, an ally, that looks like you, uh, that's is terrorizing. So I think me being able to see that and go through a landscape, almost like a small world before I entered the big
Mhm,
world,
mhm.
um, it actually helped me out to see like, okay, these microaggressions, like how I put myself out and how I like kind of, be an example for the Black community, in this small community of 25 individuals in my class. I can replicate, in the outside world and social media and educate, about this, and also just be an example that like, hey, I hopefully one day I can, climb the ladders. Maybe I am, Ash's president. I mean, a guy can dream, you know
Right.
what I mean? But just to, like, show, especially brown and Black people that, um, we don't have to be, um, called ghetto for the experience that we get with our hair and, like, having my hair and braids, I plan to get it braided
Yeah.
tomorrow, like, having that braided is professional, it's a cultural experience, and, if your clients, if your patients, if the business that you work for doesn't appreciate that or tells you like, hey, you need to go home, then there needs to be a reevaluation of the business. And then also, like, what do you want out of your clinical experience, your
Mhm.
CF, out of your school? Like, and not to say that it's going to be constant, but like, can you sit in that moment with constant eyes and almost badgering thoughts of someone saying like, "No, I don't want you to be the person you are. I need you to look like us." Then and again, that's not to call out anyone and say like, "No, you can't do it," but, I know I wouldn't be able to work for a business or, have clients saying like, can you do you mind, like, bringing up your hair or,
Yeah.
like, not having the braids tomorrow?" Like, I know I wouldn't be able to do that because that's not my identity. That's not how, I want to show who I am as a person and show, this is me and this is the Black experience. And I mean, I think you could learn a lot, from someone's hair and the story behind it. You don't have to touch it, but, we can talk about, why I have it in braids, like why, do I style it like that? I'm all for that. But
Yeah.
yeah, when you touch it, it's like,
Like, please don't touch my hair. So, I
yeah.
wanna talk a little bit I like how you mentioned advocacy, and so I wanna talk about advocacy from the lens of our colleagues who aren't Black and might not understand our experience, and then advocacy with self-advocacy, which you've already kind of touched on. So let's kinda get into the advocacy with our colleagues. And I'm also not gonna keep you long because I know you got things to do.
Yeah, no, no, you're good.
Well, okay, so I'm thinking about your experience with at the PT place and how
Mm,
to play devil's advocate, your colleagues probably meant well. That was actually probably their way of making you feel better and talking you off the ledge
Mm,
of the trauma. Just like, well, this guy comes from a different place. He just don't basically he don't know no better. He don't know no better. Is pretty much what they were
right,
trying to say.
right.
What would you have preferred for them to say? Like, how would you have I think that the company did an amazing job of even relocating that guy. Hats off to
Agreed.
so that way you don't even have to see him and be re-traumatized or even feel undervalued. But
Right.
still, there was moments of feeling isolated and like your trauma wasn't even valid almost. So how would you have preferred that to
Yeah. Yeah, no, you brought up a great point. I think they did an excellent job with relocating. Um I think when that's like the I guess the hardest thing when I talk to my white allies and friends, they're always wondering like, okay, well, should we ask the questions or should we just like stop and listen? And I think there's just a balance between the two. I think them being able to speak for me and say like on the behalf of the entire business, like we don't, condone this language, and almost like a one strike policy where it's like, unfortunately, I mean, I know that he grew up in this time, but like you should know better. You know what I mean? So it's like, all right, you can clean slate with another clinic and hopefully you learned your lesson. Um, but also the balance where it's like, I think you have to give out a lending ear where you're not one to speak first, if that makes sense. Like, so you gotta find that
Mhm.
balance where it's like, I'm going to speak for you and help you and support you because I know I'm in this place of privilege and I know that um, things will get done honestly faster if this white business is able to just say like, nope, we don't condone that, rather than it coming from a black employee where I have little to no say. Um, but starting to see too that like, okay, well, we can speak for Kevin, but let's also like hear him out after the fact. Like, let's not be first to say, oh man, that must have been unfortunate. Like, and like fill in my words when yes, it was unfortunate, and yes, he did live in that time, but like hear my story first and why that that doesn't bode well in the black community with Negro. Like I haven't heard that, in so long, since my parents' time.
Mhm.
So that language is hurtful. So yeah, you have to find that balance and hear my story first. Um and I know it can get muddied, and I know it's so hard to explain that. It's not like a plan. It's not like, "All right, allies, like, if you do this first, do this second, do this third." You just gotta have that balance, like, it's hard to explain,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
once you get there in that moment, um, it I would hope that, like, all the emotions, all the rush of, like, "Okay, I wanna support my friend," you just see it from our eyes, like, you see, like, "Okay, this is hurting my friend. Let me do what I can and speak, and then also let me hear his story or her story or their story." And I think that's a good start to being an advocate for not just the Black community, not just with our identity, but like with our hair experience
Mm.
and how it's hurtful, when we get glaring eyes or when we get people touching our hair, like hear our story, like why it hurts us when we just spent, close to an hour doing our hair
Yeah. Yeah.
and one little thing off. eh, I used to get so annoyed because um, when I was younger in middle school and high school, it was like, Kevin, you barely have any hair. Like I can touch it.
Mhm.
No, do you want me to touch your hair, right? And just, like, rub all the germs, like, it's not about that, like, I think about, Um, and I hope to portray this to the viewers that, like, if you truly think about, okay, if this was me and if I was in their shoes, like, would I feel comfortable with this? I mean, I think we can solve half the world's problems right there, you know? Um, but I just don't think uh people are quick to learn like that. They want to almost like a stove. You tell your child like, "Oh, don't touch the stove; it's gonna burn." We want people want to touch the stove first and then learn after the fact, and it's like that that burn. It's hurting us more and more because other people are seeing that, "Oh, I can touch his hair, I can speak on behalf for him, without lending an ear, like, I can do that stuff," and it's a generational thing, just like, uh, police brutality and girl, I'm telling you, there's gonna be a
Yeah,
part 3 and 4, but,
just
uh
wait for it. Just wait, y'all.
right, right. But just like any systemic racism, it's generational and it's taught. So when people see that it's not okay, but they think it's okay, that's when we get hurt. Not them, but that's how we get hurt. And I think as advocates, it's so important to have that balance, to listen and yeah, be that support system. Like, I mean, that was huge. If they weren't able to tell that patient to go to another clinic, then again, it's like the stove. He's gonna accept that. And even if he hears it from me and my colleague, like, hey, that language is inappropriate, um, do you really think listen, I mean, he could, but he's probably just laughing in his head, mocking like, "Okay, whatever." Because it's ironic because we don't necessarily have a say, especially as a PTA, like, we don't run the clinic, but just like in a lot of local businesses and the speech pathology experience, like, we don't necessarily have a lot of say. So this is, I mean, kind of a cool picture. This is the advocates, the allies, like, this is your opportunity to help us, so we can have that say and later on be telling our story.
I what
So
I'm hearing is, and there are a few other things for educational purposes, for the white allies and aspiring allies listening to this. But the first thing I want to say is what I'm hearing from you, what could have been done differently, and even a little bit of what was done differently, but what could have really been done differently on behalf of your colleagues
right.
is to set the culture of it all.
Mm,
Like, no,
yes.
we
Yeah.
don't say that. And it's up to, and really, I can't stress this enough because what's going through my mind is my experience where I've talked about before. I had a colleague make a white face joke, just like how you had that classmate make the ghetto joke, which, by the way, I want to say this before I forget. If you're listening to this and you might have an idea of what ghetto means, you might have in your head the shenane nails and hair or whatever. I need you to go on google.com and look up ghetto. Look up what ghetto really is, and then
Yeah.
you'll understand why that's so hurtful. Look up where Negro came from, the word Negro in the United States. I'm not talking about Negrita or, from overseas. I'm talking about
Yeah.
here in the US. Negro came from the hard ER. And so
Mhm.
Negro became more acceptable to say after the hard ER became more of a racial slur, even though it's always been a racial slur. But y'all know what I mean. Well,
Yeah.
so, to say, "Oh, I mean, it's just his time, it's just his time." Y'all don't understand. Him calling us Negro here at the time it was like 2020. Him calling us Negro here in modern times, he might as well be calling me the hard ER. Even saying color. Yeah, we call ourselves people of color, but to say, "I've never seen a colored man do this," we automatically think that we're back in Jim Crow, drinking from only
Right.
water
Yeah.
fountains. So, yeah,
Mm.
those are 2 things I wanted to mention, and I definitely got off on a tangent. But it's just really all about, I like how you're just saying it's about changing the cultural dynamic, and I think about myself at the lunch table when my colleague said a white face joke and was laughing. I remember her friend, who is also white, actually did look at me almost like a what is she about to do? What is she about to say? But since
Mm,
we're coming from another perspective of I'm having that internal battle of I don't want I am the only Black person in this building. So,
yeah,
I have no idea what to do. I froze. It was a trauma freeze. I literally had no idea what to do because I just couldn't believe my
yeah,
ears. What I would have loved for her to do as someone who, and that's a whole other thing. We have white colleagues speaking AAE because it's just like TikTok culture now, and that's like
yeah.
that's episode number 4, part 4. But
Right, right.
I would have loved for her to be like, "How could you say that? Like, how could you say that to her right when we have a Black person right here? Do you know what that means?" I would have felt so I probably wouldn't have left the company if I would have had her speak up. Like, if she would have just spoken up,
Yeah.
I would have known I wasn't alone. But instead, I felt so isolated. I had to go and have my therapy session, and I'm
Mm,
no one gets me here, and this is gonna keep
yeah,
going. So I just wanted to speak that to those watching this. And then another thing I wanted to say, I know we're saying a
yeah,
lot of they versus them or they versus us, and some people watching this could be listening and saying, "How divisive is that for us to say
mm,
they, us?" We're not trying to segregate ourselves from the profession, but what we are trying to do is just honor our own
yeah,
identity and our own cultural experiences within that, because at the end of the day, we are still in a predominantly white country. We're still in a white supremacist country. And so, even though white people suffer from white supremacy, episode number 5, but white people suffer from white supremacy too. But I just wanted to touch on
yeah,
that for everyone listening, because I'm thinking about questions that our viewers might have listening to this. And so the point isn't to shame anybody, but just to think about ways we can be different and actually unite
right.
each other. So Kev, I don't want to keep you here long. This has been an amazing conversation. We can talk for another hour, I'm sure.
Oh, you know it.
But is there anything else that I didn't touch on that might have been on your heart when it comes to this topic?
No, yeah, I know our conversations. I love it. But I think the last point you made about, your experience, about your coworker, yeah, if she would have said and I think that too, maybe our viewers think that, like, okay, our that problem needs to be resolved, like, right then and there, but honestly and I don't wanna speak for you, but, maybe, like, if she said something and then for the listening portion about that balance I talked about, um, she's able to speak on your behalf, and then, the other coworker who made that comment she can listen to you. Maybe it's 30 minutes from now or what have you. But I don't want our viewers to think like, okay, we gotta solve this problem like right then and there. We gotta listen to what Melanie says, and we gotta have this whole like live talk in 2 hours. You know what I mean? That would be great, but we also know life happens. But yeah, just like having that just doing something. Maybe it's the opposite way, and, um, I mean, it's tough to go through that shocking experience and, like you said, like, actually have words because like the guy, I was just like, "I have no words." But, if we are able to speak, like, "Alright, well, then listen to us first," and then you can also too go back to your coworker and be like, "Hey, yeah, so what did you get from that? Like, man, that was pretty shocking, right?" And all this stuff. So, um,
Mm,
you don't have to solve everything, but I mean, yeah, making that first step, lending an ear, speaking on our behalf, like, that is huge, and like you said, that changes everything for us. Maybe you wouldn't have left, like, it changes everything. So, back to what, Jordan said, like, everything is about, our suffering and, like, it's nothing will stop that because I mean, the thoughts and pervasive microaggressions, like, that continues to happen, so, we're hurt, and we just don't, uh, want you to get burned by the stove. I had to bring that
I
back because
love that
that
stove
you know?
analogy. Yeah, I love that stove analogy, Kev. Well, before we go, I wanted to offer you a gift. This is a project in a product, that I'll be sharing with
Oh,
the
nice.
audience next week that's going on sale, but I wanna give this to you for free just for being who you are. Uh,
Oh
can
my
you see
gosh.
this? Yes.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
working on a black hair coloring book. And so this is going on
Wow.
sale. The samples are going on sale next week, and so
Oh my
I give
gosh.
this to you for free, Kev. Um,
You did that?
hit please, Kev, I wish
No, that is
I
so
actually
good.
hired, he's a Black Latino queer man who designed this, which is, I
Wow.
wish I can say I did this, Kevin. Honestly, no, I did not. I will put the link to his information in the show notes. But yeah, so I want to give this to you for completely free. And so everyone who's seeing that
Thank you.
sees the black man cutting the hair and a child reading the book, which honestly, shout out to the child actually
Wow.
reading the book and not crying or whatever. Um, yes. So Kevin, this is for you. I'm going to send this to you via
Thank you.
email. Yeah, after the show. Um,
Wow, thank you.
yeah. So where can people find you if they want to ask you more questions and check out Singing SLP, check out Sensory Cuts,
Yeah.
and just keep up with your journey?
So you can find me on TikTok and Instagram, at singing SOP, and then my website is at or www.singingslp.com, and then same thing with YouTube. The only thing is it's at the singing SLP. And like you discussed, I'm trying to get more onto YouTube. Just trying to find the time to actually do longer videos, but yeah, you can find me there. Grad school questions, and I always refer them to your page because what you're doing is awesome. I wish I had you during my praxis prep because oh my gosh, it was so scary. But
Yeah.
yeah, grad school students, make sure to check out Melanie's page. Yeah, so anything and everything. Like I told you, I'm not gonna have a niche. It's just gonna sensory haircuts, entertaining videos, what have you.
Well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for the work you're doing, and thank you for coming on here and sharing your experience, Kev. I'm going to go ahead and close out. Everybody, thank you so much for coming, for listening, for watching, for taking notes. Again, I challenge you, go and look up. First of all, look up Seeing SLP on Instagram and on YouTube. But as far as the things that we've learned here today, go ahead and look up ghetto. Go ahead and look up where Negro came from in the United States, and that will make a really big difference. And maybe it won't be so easy and quick to deflect when those words are used in professional environments. Next week,
Mhm.
next Wednesday, I'm going to be talking to Rachel Archambault. You might know her as PTSD SLP, and we're going to be talking about how to be trauma sensitive in clinical supervision. Until then, thank you so much, Kev. We'll see y'all later. Bye, fam.